Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. Welcome to the Vegan World 2026 Moonshot podcast. Today, we are joined by Animal Rebellion. So, we're going to be talking about Animal Rebellion. We're joined by Charlie and Harley. I'm going to add them to the stream right now, who are co-organizers, among many others, of Animal Rebellion in the UK. And they're here because they were part of an amazing action that happened about a month ago, where they disrupted the supply chain for McDonald's. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. First of all, tell us, how did Animal Rebellion start?
Charlie, do you want to take this one?
Okay, I'll take this one. Animal Rebellion started when somebody who was a member of Extinction Rebellion wondered why the Animal Rebellion weren't addressing the animal agriculture and fishing as part of the climate emergency that Extinction Rebellion were broadcasting. And he set off to form a sister organization of Extinction Rebellion called Animal Rebellion. We use a lot of the same principles and values as Extinction Rebellion, and sort of work in collaboration with them in some ways.
So that was a bit confusing for me when it first started, because I was wondering, how can you address Extinction Rebellion without addressing animal agriculture and fishing, right? That's where most of the extinction is happening. Right?
Yes.
So
yeah, absolutely.
So what was the rationale for continuing Extinction Rebellion as it is, without addressing these industries?
I think, so obviously Animal Rebellion, we're a separate group to Extinction Rebellion. So we have, separate membership, we're separate volunteers, separate aims, because while Extinction Rebellion are focused on kind of the climate and ecological emergency as a whole, Animal Rebellion are focused very specifically, I guess, on the cause, the root cause of animal agriculture, and how it impacts on the climate crisis. So I think the reason Animal Rebellion split off was because of people asking that question, of asking, how can Extinction Rebellion talk about addressing the climate crisis while they're not talking about animal farming and fishing? So, we can, part of our aims and part of our goals as Animal Rebellion is to shift the environmental movement and to shift groups like Extinction Rebellion and hopefully get them to be talking about and organizing around and campaigning about animal farming and fishing as well. So, we have already seen shifts in Extinction Rebellion, becoming more receptive to our message. But, as many of us know, as organizers and activists in animal rights, and that it can be a harder sell, even within other social justice movements.
Yes, that's a very good point you make. In fact, I was just talking to our co-organizers of the World Unity Week, that the vegan movement is the only social justice movement that is openly disrespected, in these otherwise very sensitive social justice organizations like that. Yeah. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for starting this in the first place. And now let's talk about the actions you have been doing. So what are some of the actions that you have taken to bring this to the forefront of our leaders?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know, Charlie, if you want to start with some of our earlier actions, and then I can jump in with some more recent ones.
Okay.
Yes. Well, Animal Rebellion joined Extinction Rebellion in October 2019 for what's loosely termed the Rebellion in London. And among the actions we took at that were several people glued themselves onto the headquarters of DEFRA, which is the Department of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in England, Another action we had was outside a slaughterhouse where several people went into the slaughterhouse and locked on. Other things that we've done, we've had an action where we dyed the fountains in Trafalgar Square in London red to show that the government have blood on their hands as far as the environment and animal agriculture is concerned. And then obviously COVID has stopped a lot of outside actions, and Harley can explain a bit more about the McDonald's action that you mentioned at the beginning of the show.
Okay.
Go ahead, absolutely. Harley. So Animal Rebellion, like we take non-violent, like disruptive action, so non-violent direct action. So we have always prioritized actions that are more disruptive, but that also are really positive and that vision kind of the world that we want to see. So this started like the very kind of, I guess, the earliest action that really, I guess, identified Animal Rebellion as its own thing, separate from Extinction Rebellion, was during October 2019, when we occupied Smithfield Meat Market, transforming it into like a fruit and vegetable market. So since then, we've targeted, other kind of symbols of the industry, such as, like we shut down a slaughterhouse during September of last year. We also blocked the road near the entrance to the Department of Health in central London with a big pink slaughter truck that said animal farming equals pandemics and climate crisis, as well as the actions that Charlie mentioned. So the most recent thing we've done, I guess, was McDonald's, which obviously, is a symbol of this broader animal farming and fishing industry, which causes so much destruction. So we wanted to really drive home this message that if we're going to see change in the world, and if we're going to see change for the planet and for, trillions of animals, these big corporations need to take responsibility. So we shut down all 4 of McDonald's distribution centers across the UK. So these are what provides McDonald's with, all their burgers and their buns and their drinks and basically everything they need to stay open. So we blockaded them with people as well as, equipment, and we kind of held them from between 19 and 30 hours. So I think it was 96 hours all up across the 4 sites. And, because of that, we saw massive disruption to the supply chain, with stores having to close across the UK. And this is kind of was just the beginning of this more extended campaign, which is mobilizing people around this idea that we need to see system change in these industries.
Right. So that's really, you're putting your bodies on the line to stop this destruction from happening. Now, what were the repercussions for what you did? What happened to you during the action? So go ahead.
Go for it, Charlie. Go for it.
Okay. Well, the McDonald's action was a bit strange. The blocking of the 4 distribution centres, in so much as at 2 of the centres, the police didn't take any action against anybody, which was strange. But in a couple of the other places, people were taken into custody by the police. I'm not sure of the status at the moment. I imagine they've been bailed and will have to appear at some point. Harley may know the answer to that.
Yeah, so the people who were arrested, it was a really interesting kind of situation where a lot of people weren't arrested who were kind of locked on, and as you said, putting their bodies on the line. And everyone was completely willing to take, I guess, the consequences of their actions, which I think shows the passion that people have. But a lot of people, they weren't. They were just kind of told by police that they were free to keep going, and that's which was quite amazing. And the people who were arrested, they're on bail at the moment, and they're due to kind of appear for various like plea hearings and stuff in early July. So at that stage, we'll know more about like what the charges are. But yeah, usually for things like that, it's, yeah, people are charged with something like blocking a highway or occasionally kind of aggravated trespass. So yeah, I think people were really willing to like take this action because they know how critical it is. And we always say that, you know, no action is over until the last person is out of court. So, you know, we continue with things like court support. But I think the more interesting repercussions have been seen through, I guess, increasing police response to Animal Rebellion. So we saw at G7, which happened recently, where we had a presence. We saw like very heavy policing and specifically targeting Animal Rebellion as a group. So yeah, we saw policing done towards us, which wasn't done towards other groups. So it definitely seems like we're being identified as a group who, I guess is making waves potentially, and which is a good thing, but also it's hard for a smaller group to then be suddenly met with quite a lot of police presence.
Right. Yeah. But, you know, you're targeting the foundation of the system, which is the oppression of animals, right? Because if you cannot oppress animals, how can you oppress other people? And the entire system is based on oppressing people and, you know, extracting money from them, lying to them, getting them addicted into compulsive behaviors. I mean, this is the business model of the system.
Yeah. I think we've seen throughout history as well, like when you start to make change, that's when you get resistance from the state and the system. And so we've seen that happen. And we're starting to see that happen, which in a way like makes us feel like we are making the change that we want to see, and we just need to keep building and keep growing and keep getting more and more momentum to keep making the change.
How has the reaction been from the public? Go ahead, Charlie.
Yes. I help with the Facebook page and the social media team, and you get two sorts of reactions. You get the people who will post a picture of a steak on a barbecue and sort of go, yummy, more meat for me. And you get these asinine comments, are quite, there could be 1,000 in a week when we have a busy action. And then you get the other side of the coin, where people are saying, thank you so much for doing this. And they really appreciate what we're doing, and they understand why we're doing it. There are some people that just refuse to be educated, almost strange, but that's the reality.
Yeah, I guess you're dealing with a mass addiction, and so people are being called out on it, and they have to face up to their own complicity in this. So
definitely,
it's understandable that the kind of reaction you're getting. So now, was there a lot of media coverage of the McDonald's action?
Yeah, it was probably the most covered action that we've done. So there was over 150 press mentions, including like national, international TV and radio, and online and print. So it was really kind of a massive explosion of press, and we have had a lot more press interest for other things that we're doing as well since. So yeah, I guess it's for us, it shows us, was like Animal Rebellion believes in direct action, and we believe that it works for a variety of reasons, for the kind of practical and the tangible benefits of directly causing economic damage and disrupting a business, but also for the impact it has on people's, like, I guess, consciousness, because when you disrupt the status quo and you disrupt the media in a way, it's so powerful. So yeah, it's been quite amazing to see the real upsurge, and also just the coalitions we've been forming with other groups who, even if they may not be vegan animal rights groups, they agree with our message and our demand, and they want to get on board. So that's been amazing as well.
Yeah, I mean, by my calculations, it is the leading cause of climate change. I mean, I wrote a paper on that. At first, I couldn't get it published almost anywhere. No one wanted to hear it. And but finally, there was a journal which published it. Because if you take into account the land that's being used for raising these animals, and how much deforestation has happened to raise these animals. I mean, right now the Amazon is burning up so that we can make more burgers. I mean, how silly is this as a species that we're allowing this to happen?
Yeah.
Right? It's almost suicidal what our governments are doing. And you have every right to protect your lives and to protect the lives of your loved ones. So I really applaud you for your courage for taking this on. And and disrupting the status quo. So now, Animal Rebellion, I know, is active in the UK, but are there other chapters that are active in other places?
Yes, there are. Yes, I'm involved with the international team, and we have chapters scattered throughout the world. The most active chapters are probably the ones in Europe. So there's Sweden, or Stockholm has a big chapter. There's several chapters in Germany. Germany has a national team, and several of the cities have teams, and they frequently do actions. There's a very active team in the Czech Republic, and then over in America there are teams in Canada, or they call themselves Turtle Island in deference to the indigenous people. And there's a team in New York. There's teams in Australia. That they are literally throughout the world. There's a team in Taiwan does actions, and it just seems to be growing. I mean, we only started in the spring of 2019 forming the group, and it's just how do we galvanize the influx of volunteers into a strong bonded movement, really.
Right. Yeah. Clearly, what you're trying to do is raising awareness of the silliness. I mean, the utter I mean, I don't know what to call this. It is, we are going down the tubes and saying we can't change this. This is the way we have to be. But I'm so glad that you are taking this action. Now, in the other Animal Rebellion groups around the world, are there similar actions that have been going on? Any examples you could say?
Yeah, I think there's like some similar, some different. We're self-organized. Like, we use like self-organizing systems where groups are autonomous. So anyone can take action in Animal Rebellion's name as long as they follow our principles and values, and our messaging. So there's some groups. Sometimes we do unified actions across the world. So for example, the Blood on Their Hands action, where we dyed the fountains red, that happened simultaneously in countries all over the world, and we got international press for that because of that. But then also, countries and cities will take action that's specific to their kind of their situation, because obviously what's happening in the UK is quite different potentially from what's happening in New York or Czech Republic. So I don't know if you know of any recent actions, Charlie, that have been happening in the international groups that you can think of off the top of your head. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, yeah.
The Czech Republic had a big action this last week, which we've just covered on our Facebook channels. Germany would be having actions, every other week or every third week. The action in the Czech Republic, they built cages out of wood, and they went inside the cages and sort of showed the conditions that animals are kept in.
Right.
And they were locked on inside these cages, and the police had to sort of dismantle these structures, and they arrested people. But yes, there are actions, happening quite frequently.
So, what are the principles of Animal Rebellion, and what kind of actions are allowed under Animal Rebellion?
Maybe we can tag team with this one, Charlie. Let's try.
Okay,
so we
yes.
we have 10 principles and values, which for the most part echo Extinction Rebellion's. Our first principle is the one where we differ from Extinction Rebellion, which is that our first principle is that we are an anti-speciesist movement with a shared vision of change. So that's because, like, sometimes, we talk a lot about in Animal Rebellion about, system change rather than individual change. And what that means is that rather than focusing on, like, individual, like, asking people to make individual changes, such as go vegan, we focus on the need for system change, in that we need a plant-based food system. And, like, the reason for that is varied. But one of the big reasons is just that, we need so many different layers, and there's so many amazing groups already working on, vegan outreach, and showing people how to make changes to their own lives. But we also know that we need to pressure the government and these big corporations to make changes to the overall system. So, we also always want to remain grounded in why we do this, which is that it's for climate and animal justice. It's never just for one, but it's for the other. So we also have principles around, no blaming and no shaming, which is all about that, we're focused on trying to change the system, but we know that every individual is just as much part of this system as we are. So we don't focus on, blaming individuals, which kind of ties in, I guess, with a really important principle of, like, nonviolence, that we are a nonviolent movement, and that kind of comes into everything we do, from how we take action to how we communicate. Maybe you can jump in with some of the other ones, Charlie.
Yes, sure. Yes. We value reflecting and learning, so there's a lot of learning goes on within Animal Rebellion, and we welcome anybody. They don't necessarily have to be vegans. We don't necessarily welcome all behaviors, because people have to adhere to our principles. The sort of key thing that overlaps with the Extinction Rebellion is that we have this very similar demands, which are, we're asking the government to tell the truth, we're asking the government to act now, and we're asking the government to go beyond politics, which sort of basically means, in this country, in the UK anyway, holding citizens' assemblies, which will be bound by law to be adhered to. And these are big assemblies with a mass of different people taking part in them.
So you're focusing on the government, or are you focusing on corporations? Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So traditionally, Extinction Rebellion has focused on the government, and Animal Rebellion kind of went along that lines as well. Because, obviously the government are the ones who can make these broad sweeping changes to make, like, rapid change, like the kind of rapid change that we need. So we've done actions at government departments such as DEFRA in the UK, which is the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and, other departments as well, like the Department of Health. But I think we also recognize that corporations have this massive responsibility, and that they have kind of, like, in a way, taken over from the government in some ways, in that, a lot of people will, like, we still, as much as it means, like, we still have, like, elections, and we still have this way of, like, people participating in who leads them in the government. Whereas, like, when it comes to corporations, there's these massive multi-million, multinational businesses which make decisions that affect the whole world. but no one's voted them in, and no one's kind of like holding them to account in a way.
Right.
So that's why I think a big reason that we have shifted to still focusing on the government and demanding that they tell the truth that animal agriculture is a leading cause of the climate crisis, but also acts now to transition us to a plant-based food system, which is, inevitable and what we need.
Right.
So yeah, we still have that focus on the government, but we also kind of have this secondary focus as well on these big corporations who have the power to pressure the government to make this change, and also have the power to make changes that will significantly reduce the amount of destruction that is being caused.
Right. But, the way we have set up our system, corporations, their only objective is to make money. They will sell you anything to make money, right? So they're allowed to do that. That's why we have set up the system. And then our governments are supposed to be on our side, looking after us, right? But something happened in the 1970s that changed all that. In the US, there was a law passed in 1970. I don't know the exact name of the law, but basically it asked that all congressional votes and all Senate votes have to be public. So you no longer had a secret ballot. Okay, so you had to be public. And you can see from that point on, the correlation between what the people want and what the government does just diverges. There isn't any correlation anymore, because it's whatever people with the most money want that gets done. Because when the voting is not secret anymore, the congressmen and the senators have to answer to those who gave them the money. They say, hey, I gave you money and you didn't vote my way, so I won't give you money anymore. So basically they become slaves to the money system, right? So It's systemic, and it was built in, So that law, I think, was deliberately passed by corporations to take over the power from the people, right? So because they were looking at all these Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act that was making them change and saying, no, we don't want that anymore. We need to take over the power. And so that's how they basically subverted democracy at that point. Did that happen in the UK as well? Do you know?
Yes, I'm not quite sure that it would have been a law, but the corruption and the sort of backhanders to politicians are clearly happening, and clearly happening even more openly.
Right.
The most recent government, I think, there's a problem which isn't even being addressed.
Right.
Yeah, I think we see it at so many different levels. Like, for example, Extinction Rebellion have been targeting the press, and they've been targeting, the Murdoch media. And in a recent trial around an action which was against Murdoch kind of owned newspapers, it was found that the police response was essentially dictated by high up government, rather than being kind of this police actually responding, which is completely against how it's supposed to be. So we're seeing that these big corporations have a direct line to the government and can essentially tell them what to do, who then can tell the police what to do. So it's definitely the corruption is at a very deep level, but we still believe that people power is the answer, and we still believe that people do have the choice and the chance to kind of take action. And if enough of us kind of choose and are able to take to the streets, to take action, to take repeated sustained action, then we we believe as Animal Rebellion that that's how we can make change.
Right. So are votes in the parliament public? I mean, do you get to know exactly how your member of the parliament voted in the UK?
Yes, the members of parliament will generally in the UK toe the party line. There's a party whip. So and nearly everything is done by the party in power simply to retain their power. So people who break the party line will generally not last very long in their party.
So their votes are public. So the party knows exactly how they voted.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the same problem, right? Because
yes.
we know that if my vote is public, I really don't have much power. I'm a slave to whoever is paying me, so to speak. That's the system we have right now.
Yes.
So when you look at it from a systemic perspective, right, and you realize that you have a system of normalized violence that's founded on the exploitation of the planet, the exploitation of animals, and the entire currency system is based on this extraction of profit, colonizing other people's bodies, colonizing animal bodies, and extracting profit from that, right? So how do you think anyone in this system can change it from within?
I think, like, historically, with like social movements in the past, what we've seen happening is that there just becomes a critical mass of people who are putting direct pressure on the system to change. And I think what we've seen as well is that there's external factors as well which force the system to change. So if we're thinking about animal farming, for example, we know that it's not financially viable. It's not viable for the planet. Like it's not at the moment, the only thing that's maintaining the financial viability of animal farming is really intensive factory farming. Yet we also know that about 80% of people in the UK are against intensive factory farming. So the whole thing is it's a false equation. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So we base our organizing on theories of social change, which kind of based around this idea that when you mobilize people around a vision and an idea, you can reach this point where enough people have just shifted their idea of what is normal, and the government, no matter what the government is, can't kind of resist against sustained public pressure for any long period of time. We've seen it time and time again in the past with the civil rights movement, the Indian independence movement, so many movements over time of just even more recent ones like the marriage equality movement. Of we've seen this kind of intractable beliefs that have been shifted by sustained public pressure. So we believe that by creating these big moments of mobilization, so big actions where suddenly everyone is talking about it, we shift what is acceptable and what is normal. And with that kind of sustained pressure and more people demanding change, then the government has to act.
Would the government act, or would other people, would the experts come together and say, okay, here is another way of playing this game? Because the game of money is rigged to be like this, right? The game of money is fundamentally colonialist and capitalist and exploitative.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes, we do see that even the businesses that are sort of green businesses, there's we all know the term greenwash, but there are certainly disruptions to the food industry that are happening, and the food industry is clearly choosing the cheaper option, that they still want to make their profits, and they are beginning to move away from meat towards plant foods. Whether it happens quick enough, who knows?
Well, I mean, as it is, the animal food industry is heavily dependent on subsidies. Government subsidies. Without government subsidies, there is no business.
True.
There's no profit there. So, when you look at the land animal use, land animal industries providing just 12% of the food we eat. Okay, 85% comes from plant foods already, according to IPCC numbers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And only 3% comes from the ocean. And to get that 3% from the ocean, we are literally destroying the entire ocean. Okay? That's 71% of the surface area of the earth that's being dredged and bottom trawled and destroyed for just 3% of our food. So is that a more vulnerable point that you could go and leverage for animal rebellion?
Definitely. So, like, we always say, like, from the start, our focus has been on animal farming and fishing. And I forgot to mention earlier, one of our first actions actually was an action at Billingsgate Fish Market, which is a kind of like institution in the UK. And I think, I think awareness around the destruction caused by fishing is really at peak at the moment because of, Seaspiracy, which I can't count the number of conversations I've had lately with people who've seen that film and have had to really think about the kind of lifestyle that they're living and what they eat. So I think it's definitely it's something that I know we've been talking about a lot more recently, about the need to really focus on the oceans. But I think sometimes we do get landlocked in a funny way of that, the oceans are over there, there's something else. And I think as well, when we're thinking about as animal advocates as well, fishes often get forgotten about because, the level of compassion bridging, I guess, is harder when you're trying to convince someone to care for a cow versus a fish, which is obviously ridiculous. But I think it's you're absolutely right. It's such a massive atrocity that's happening, and the trillions of lives that are destroyed, as well as all the ecological impacts. And I think it's something that really needs a spotlight shone brightly on it, and action taken immediately. And I think the film, the Seaspiracy film, was such a valuable kind of a light that was really kind of I guess it's been forgotten about or overlooked for a long time. So we work quite closely as well with Ocean Rebellion, who are a group who do a lot of actions around our oceans. And they generally focus mainly on, the influence of, for example, oil drilling, and companies like Shell. But I think we've also been talking to them a lot about fishing, and the impacts of the fishing industry. So hopefully that's going to be a major focus of us as well moving forward, and developing kind of demands around that as well. What do we need to see happening right now, to kind of make this have this transition start, because it's obviously so urgently needed.
Right. I think there was a scene in Seaspiracy where they pointed out that after the Deepwater Horizon spill, the ocean recovered. Marine life recovered after that horrific oil spill, because what the fishing industry does on a routine basis is worse for marine life than a horrific oil spill. Okay, so if Ocean Rebellion is not focusing on fishing, they're missing the boat, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next, I wanted to ask you about coalitions between organizations. You have Animal Rebellion, and I see Direct Action Everywhere is also doing similar things. So have you thought about, or are there same people in both, or how does it work, and what is the difference between what you focus on and what DXE focuses on?
I could speak loosely on that. DXE have always been involved with sort of rescue. They've gone to places to rescue animals, and in sort of ceremonial ways.
Right.
We've always been focused on pointing out the climate side of the animal agriculture and fishing industries. And we have recently seen more animal rights, if you like, organisations have got involved more with the climate debate.
Okay.
So I think it's a case of sort of by any means necessary in terms of, you know, doing things. You know, everything works. Different groups have different sort of specialist subjects, if you like.
Right. So, but you're just shining a light, highlighting.
Absolutely. And yeah, so we do work, quite closely with other groups. We share resources. We don't really share, thinking of DXE specifically, like when you asked about, is it the same people? Like, yeah, it's definitely very different people. DXE isn't as active in the UK, but, we are in contact, quite good contact with a lot of different animal justice groups. And I think, we like to think of ourselves as being part of the movement ecology, as it's kind of known, which is that we're one group working on one goal, one specific kind of area, which is that we always have aimed to be the bridge between the climate and the environmental movement, the climate and the animal movement. So we always aim to be that bridge and to hopefully shift the environmental movement to be talking more about animals, because of how critical and crucial and important that is. So yeah, we do like there's so much other work that's happening as well. There's people who do outreach. There's people that do campaigns about, whether it's animal agriculture or other forms of animal exploitation, or, climate justice groups as well. And we see all of them as kind of being part of this bigger thing, which we're also part of, which is just moving towards a goal of animal and climate justice and a different world, a world that's not based on exploitation. As you said, that's the goal, right? Yeah,
that's the goal. Yes. So that, I'm glad you brought that up. If you want a world that's not based on exploitation, you're really looking at a system that's based on nonviolence. Okay, that's founded on nonviolent principles, which is fundamentally a plant-based food system. It has to have a plant-based food system. So, which means veganism is the foundation of that new system that you're looking for. Whereas the old system, the current system, which I consider it the old system because in my mind it's already gone. It is well beyond its use by date.
Dying breaths.
Yes.
That is based on this system is based on animal agriculture. So that's the foundation of this system, and so I've been sort of looking at what would a nonviolent system look like, okay, where you lead your ordinary lives and the planet thrives. Okay, and I don't think it can be morphed from the current system into that one. So I've been sort of focusing on what would the rules of that system look like, and what kind of money system would you have there, what kind of currency system would you have there, and so on. But it's a fascinating, because I'm a systems specialist. I'm a systems engineer, and so it's a fascinating design process that we have to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a few of us, about 6 of us in Animal Rebellion, who did quite a short but a very interesting a course on systems practice. And we were, I think, exploring that very question of what does this new system look like? Because we always talk about that we want to see a just and sustainable plant-based food system. So for us, that means it's centered in justice, and it's centered in a lack of exploitation. But I think the actual question of what does that look like is such a fascinating one, because we have to reimagine everything, reimagine our transport system, reimagine our relationship to animals, which is something that I'm really passionate about, thinking deeply about, like, what does it look like to have an alternate relationship with animals? Reimagine money, reimagine food. It's just, I think it's a fascinating topic. It's something that I think we should all be thinking about right now, of what is this system that we're working towards? Not just the kind of, really practical, what we want to see the end of, but what do we want to see the beginning of, and how do we start to show that right now, and how do we start to live that right now, and building those alternatives today, rather than, first we end this and then we think about what's next.
Yeah, that's because when you don't know what you're going to, people tend to cling to what they already know. This is normal for people, right? So because, well, I mean, it is bad, but at least I'm eating. So I'll stick to this, right?
If we don't have a clear vision, we've got nothing to work towards.
Right.
I mean, I think Animal Rebellion embraces organizations like the Vegan Organic Network, and we would see some small scale, many small scale growing happening, rather than factory produced meats as an alternative, for example.
Right. Factory produced plant-based meats.
Yes.
Right.
But,
I think it's...
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say it's such a fascinating topic, and I feel like it's something that we really embrace those tricky questions, I guess, as an organization and as a group of we aren't at the moment, like a lot of us, we're not experts. We don't know the answers, but what we are is we're a big group, a growing group of people who want to see change and want that vision of a new world. And I think when you bring those people together, that's when you start to see that magic of, we've seen throughout history, groups coming together, communities coming together, I guess, and kind of building what the world could look like, and then seeing those small scale, those changes. I know I would definitely be very interested in the work you're doing, Sailesh, and I think Animal Rebellion as a movement will is as well. So that sounds really exciting and
wonderful.
needed.
I'll send you a copy of the paper that we are writing.
Please do. Love that.
Engineers' solutions to scientists' warnings. So
amazing.
I was intrigued the other day hearing you talk about how we needed to establish veganism before we destroyed or removed the fossil fuel coal powered stations, which had never occurred to me before. Yeah,
that was a
really
paper that Jim Hansen wrote 10 years ago, something like that. And I've always wondered why he wrote that paper and no one seems to be addressing it. What is going on? He called it the Faustian bargain of fossil fuels.
Okay, yes.
Deal with the devil. But it really isn't the Faustian bargain. It's actually, it's showing us that the only way out is through compassion. That you have to have a vegan world and a vegan system as you dismantle the fossil fuel industry. So this is another reason why Extinction Rebellion should be putting all its resources in Animal Rebellion. I should merge Animal Rebellion.
Well, we'd love that. We'd love all of their resources.
Yes.
But we do love working with Extinction Rebellion. It's nice to see more and more, I guess, Animal Rebellion being recognized as a movement that is legitimate. I think when it started, it was kind of like, oh, there's those crazy vegans kind of doing their thing. But I think from a kind of insider perspective in Animal Rebellion, I think the amount of people now who want to join us, and the amount of people now who kind of I guess something that I found really interesting is, I know when I first went vegan, 5 years ago, which isn't that long in the grand scheme of things, but it's quite long in the grand scheme of my life. The question was always a debate. It was always well, you're wrong or I'm right. It was I was kind of, on the side of we shouldn't be eating animals. And it was always, the debate was, no, we should be. And what I've noticed lately is this transition to the debate being, we should be eating less animals or no animals. And I think obviously we want it to be shifting to the point where we're not only agreed that we should be eating no animals, but actual change is happening. But I think the fact that we're seeing that shift in the public towards oh well, yeah, we know we should be eating less, and we know it's not good for this, like
Right.
XYZ reasons. I think like that shows how far, like how far we have come, and the potential to keep pushing and keep going further. So yeah, I do have a lot of hope, I guess.
Yeah, to me, it's like a dam that we have punched holes in the dam, lots of them, and the water is gushing out slowly, and it is going to burst at some point in time. There's no question in my mind it's going to burst, because the BBC, for heaven's sake, the BBC said ministers should be urging people to eat less meat. So it's like, it's something in the air. If they don't say it, they look like, no one wants to listen to them anymore.
Absolutely.
The crazy person in the basement who's saying things that no one wants to listen to.
We used to be the crazy person in the basement. Like,
I know.
Look how far it's come.
Right, it's the other way around now. They become the crazy person in the basement.
Someone always has to be the crazy person in the basement. That's right. I think. Yeah.
I tend to think one of our keys to success will come from the Chinese, because they've always, until maybe the most recent 3 or 4 years, just grown and grown their meat industry. And the Chinese government is now imploring their citizens to eat less meat. They realize that they're destroying their own workforce, for want of another way of putting it. I mean, their objective is probably based on financial reasons, but at least they are moving things in what we would see as the right direction.
Yeah, it's actually it's quite strange to see dairy consumption increasing in China, because dairy is probably I think the Chinese are one of the most lactose normal people on the planet.
I like that. Lactose normal.
Lactose normal people on the planet, and they shouldn't be drinking milk, even their mother's milk, after after they weaned, much less the milk of another species, species that's 5 times our weight and has to grow her babies 5 times faster than us. So to me it's just mind-boggling that we even thought that this was food to begin with. Dairy is I mean, even in India, right? India is, I think 60 to 80% of the people are lactose normal. So which means the Indian government promoting dairy is against India's interests.
Yes.
I mean, completely against India's interests, because you're making your own people sick. And then you're making them have diabetes and cancer and heart disease, so that the so-called healthcare industry can make money off of their bodies. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, dairy. So how is the dairy discussion going on in the UK?
I think, so I'm actually from Australia originally, and I think it's quite, I've only been here not too long, but I think it's quite similar in a way, in that more, like, I think the shift more generally is, it's quite easy at the moment to look at the dairy industry, and think of it as declining, because the number of farms are decreasing, and I think the amount of consumption is decreasing overall, especially of like products like dairy milk, and the amount of for example, like sales in milk alternatives are rising. But I think, like, when you dig a little bit deeper, what I've found is that a lot of that is because more dairy products are being exported to other countries. There's more kind of, like, I guess the products are changing. So, for example, like, whereas like the actual consumption of like dairy milk might be going down, there's more production of things like cheese and, powdered milk. So things like that. And I think what we're also seeing is, while the number of farms is decreasing, the size of those farms is increasing. So we're seeing an increasing industrialization of the dairy industry. So yeah, I think it's not like, I think publicly you might think that, you know, dairy consumption is decreasing and there's a lot more uptake of like plant-based alternatives. But I think it's an industry that is really like, it's not viable. Again, it's not viable financially. And to address that, there is this increasing industrialization and increase in export and, you know, pushing products that no one's eating to other countries who are, you know, more vulnerable or in need of food. And so I think it's definitely a problem. You know, we still have mandatory school milk in the UK, for example.
Mandatory school milk. Okay.
Mandatory that milk is served every day in schools. So yeah, I think that's a sign of how backwards, I guess, the standards are, which is something that Animal Rebellion has been.
Well, to protect our children, shouldn't we have an action to remove that mandatory school milk from the schools and throw them away?
Yeah, do you want to? We actually have a campaign all about that, the Plant-Based Council's campaign. So yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
the dairy industry is very sort of almost subversive. I mean, globally, they've been sending milk powder and whey into products in China and India, hoping to break what you term lactose normal, so that the people won't will just get used to it and not become sick when drinking or eating milk products.
Well, I'll tell you how it works. I mean, I used to consume dairy, and I always had this low level of discomfort throughout my life. Okay, and it turned into arthritis, sinus problems. I always had sinus problems, and I thought, well, that's the way I am. That's my constitution, right?
Yeah, no.
Once I stopped dairy in 2008, miraculously I became so healthy within a month. So what the heck? I've been suffering from this for so long, and no one told me that. and my doctors didn't even know. This is the problem, right? So our doctors didn't even know. It is so insidious. To me, dairy is the gateway drug for the animal agriculture industry.
Liquid meat, isn't it? Liquid meat.
Yeah. It's the gateway drug. And so if you can address that, you know, and create a campaign around eliminating dairy, that would be so helpful for so many people. I mean, even in the UK, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think dairy really is like I think it's often considered falsely considered such a benign industry as well. Like it's often like, oh, you know, I've so many people give up eating, you know, meat, but they won't give up dairy because there's this false perception of it still being very idealistic, and you know, oh well, the cows aren't killed, they already produce the milk and all that. But I think it's an industry that's in such desperate need of transition as well, because of the whole kind of way the whole foundation of it is like, it's just so fundamentally exploitative and resource intensive, and completely backwards, as we've been saying, in like the amount of time and energy and resources that goes into producing this product, which the vast majority of humans can't even consume properly, which gives nothing back to the world. So yeah, it's when you actually kind of look at the industry, it's insanity, and it's just so so I think it's so important to kind of like when we're talking about, you know, addressing the animal agriculture and fishing industries, like dairy is such a massive part of that.
Right. Well, we are near the end of our time, so thank you so much for being here. I'm going to post a link to your donation page. So people, please support Animal Rebellion, because they're being targeted by the police, and I'm sure you have a lot of lawyers' bills to pay.
Yes,
very soon. But I'm so grateful for the work that you do. And
thank you for having us on your show, Sailesh.
Yeah, and for shining the light on this. You know, this is This is a male-dominant industry, according to Emek. Yeah, they don't even understand what it means to produce milk and to give birth. It's easy for them to destroy. This is why it's a male-dominant industry and run by lactose abnormal people.
Well, no, thank you so much for the work you're doing, and everyone at Animal Rebellion is such a so appreciative of we take action on the streets maybe, but we can't do that without the science and the research. It's such a privilege to be able to chat with you and be on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.